Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Diane Kameen, and I thank you for inviting me here to speak to you today. And this is actually my alma mater. I graduated from communication studies here at Concordia, so it's a little bit like coming home for me, so this is nice. I'm going to tell you a story today about an English-speaking community in Quebec City. So we'll start once upon a time. The English-speaking community of Quebec City began to take firm root. There were Irish and Scottish and Welsh and English who all chose the Quebec City region as their home. In 1800s and the early 1900s, the percentage of the population who spoke English in Quebec City was actually up to 40%. Can you believe that? Later, as the French-speaking community population grew, the English-speaking population remained steady, but proportionally that meant that we became fewer and fewer in numbers as the French-speaking population grew. And then there was the exodus. But I didn't come here today to talk to you about that. That's a whole other subject. Now, in the 1980s, we saw the end of the exodus, but we saw also a very fragmented community. Anglophones, finding an Anglophone when I moved to Quebec City was a little bit like finding a needle in a haystack. And believe me, I was looking. And it was only when I stumbled across Voice of English-Speaking Quebec that I realized that there was a community, and actually it was quite a vibrant community. But generally speaking, people were isolated, and so were institutions. Everybody was off doing their own thing, doing it well. Churches, schools, health institutions, doing it well, but doing it pretty much on their own. And there was a general lack of knowledge about health services and how to access those health services. And Anglophones used what we call traditional, primarily their family doctor. But apart from that, they were not using the services that were available to them through the health and social services system. There was a bit of a fortress mentality, even for Francophones. The CLSCs were a bit of I thought of them as a bit of an ivory tower, we're here and you have to come to us. And even the traditionally Anglo institutions, like the Jeffery Hale, were serving more. The pendulum had swung pretty far over to serving French-speaking community, and that was normal because Anglophones were only approximately 1.8% of the population. So no, we couldn't survive on serving Anglos alone. And who was most affected by this? Well, it was seniors. Their needs were growing, and they really didn't know how to get the help that they required. But, happily, there was a turning point. And it always takes a champion in a community, I find, to rally people together. And our champions were Janet Kozak, who is the leader, she was the director of nursing at St. Bridget's Home, and Richard Walling. Many of you probably know Richard Walling, who is my boss and who I feel very fortunate to be able to work with on a daily basis. And they brought together community leaders from all different schools and churches and government institutions and really they recognized there was a need, that seniors needed to have access to health and social services in their language. And these discussions led to the Regional Health Board, which is today known as the Agence. Some of you may know the Agence. They funded a study to look at the needs of English-speaking seniors. And when I was young, I didn't see the need for studies. I actually thought they were kind of a waste of time. My motto was, just do it. Let's just do it. We know it's the right thing to do. But as Richard told me the other day, never tell a story without numbers, and never show numbers without a story. But numbers speak, and results convince the community that they needed to invest in service development. And we're very fortunate in Quebec City to have a significant number of organizations that have funds to contribute to the well-being of the English-speaking community of Quebec City. And all of those organizations were involved, and they all committed a certain amount of money and they over a 5-year period, and that's still the case. They will commit for 5 years at a time. Okay, so we're lucky to have that. And so with that investment and that study, the result was in 1991, our baby was born, and we named it Holland Centre. And this picture is a really good example of community collaboration in itself. That's Mary Woods, who was very involved in the YWCA and was our first president. Very, very active senior member of the community who was a driving force. And in the middle, I can't remember his name, but he worked for the Regional Health Board, so he was our government representative. You may recognize Russell Williams, who was an MLA at the time. And on the left is Mark Kelly, a CBC personality who's gone on to great things. And next to him with the beard is Louis Hanrahan, who was the responsible for English services at the Regional Health Board, who today is the director of Jeffery, Hale, St. Bridget's. And then that's Harry Hannon, who was the then director of St. Bridget's Home. So that photo in itself represents the partnerships that were in place that time that started Holland Centre. So first there was one employee, and that was Richard, and he did the blueprint for where we were going to go. And I remember that's a really bad picture of me standing next to the pamphlet racks, and I like to think that getting old you get better, because I look at that and I go, whoa! Anyway, that's Gail Quinn, who was in charge of the volunteers, and of course Richard. And we started off with 4 services, very, very basic services, and they were information and referral, which I was in charge of, a newsletter, which was also my responsibility. The seniors do drop in, which was a weekly event that seniors dropped in, and we had some very nice afternoons with them. And the telephone check-in service, which was a daily call from a volunteer to make sure that a senior on the list to receive the call was well. And if they didn't answer, we would swing into action to find out why they didn't answer without letting us know that they weren't going to be home to answer their call. And that was 100% volunteer, and it really meant a lot, and it still does to the people that get that service. Now, there was a development strategy, let me take a little aside here, that these services that we created, they did not compete with other services, so nobody was threatened by our existence. They were a complement to those services. They were fully under the control of the community, and they responded to an identified need. Did I mention the study? And the results were measurable. So when we talk about measurable, we had a mailing list. We asked people to sign up we advertised in the paper, and we sent out our newsletters, and we asked people to register to receive our newsletter. And within the first 3 months, we had 100 telephone calls or drop-ins for information requests, and we had 350 subscribers to our newsletter, all seniors. So that was pretty impressive we thought. And then we had the seniors do drop in, which was every Monday afternoon, and its spin-off, which was the walking club, and some of you may notice Eaton's in the background, the good old days. We had Easter luncheons, and the drop-in was very simple. It was just people coming in and having a cup of tea and working on puzzles, and we'd give some health talks, and it was just a really nice way to spend some time with people and get to know them and get to know what their needs were in terms of health and social services. And we had, as I mentioned, the telephone check-in, and then that spun off into the day center, which was, we got a donation from a foundation to buy a bus, and we would go and pick people up and bring them in for the day where they could meet a nurse. And the telephone check-in, you see there, Kay Irving, she lived to be 100, and she started on the check-in. She must have done daily calls for 20 years, and we just always say, we could never, ever, ever do what we do without the volunteer appreciation. We make sure that every year we thank our volunteers with a nice evening event. We have a newsletter now specifically for volunteers. And within 1 year, she had 74 clients. So that proved, once again, that there was definitely a need. So you see there's that snowball effect, right? And through it all, it's always the same. It's always about seniors and the quality of relationships. And as Oprah said, I love Oprah, I see you, I hear you, and what you say matters to me. And to me, that's what it boils down to, right? It's all one-on-one interaction with human beings and saying, you have a need, and we're here to help you. It's as simple as that. We're listening. In 1994, we did another study, and we expanded to serve. We also noticed that there were, when I moved to Quebec City, I spoke no French. I didn't even want to have kids because I thought there's no way, I don't want to be at home alone with a screaming baby. I don't speak the language. My family's in Winnipeg. Not happening, right? So families were, with young kids were isolated. We knew there was a need. There was a need to serve the kids in the English-speaking schools as well. So in 1997, we created a legal partnership, actually. We went a step further, and we went into Holland Centre entered into a legal agreement with the CLSC, Haute-Ville-des-Rivières, La Centre Jeunesse Québec, St. Bridget's Home, and the Jeffery, Hale. Everybody signed on to a legal agreement, and the beauty of that was it helped these public organizations to meet their responsibility to serve the English-speaking population. So that was a win-win. That's a win-win for everybody. But, as you all know, nothing stays the same. The only thing certain is life is change. And adapting to change is always a must, but somehow the more things change, I find, the more they stay the same. So I'm just going to take you back in history one more time, and just to highlight a beautiful example of the English-speaking community's tradition of caring in Quebec City. When in 1856, Father Bernard McGowran, and I love to say that name, and I tend to put on a fake Irish accent when I do it, founded St. Bridget's Home as a shelter for Irish immigrant widows and orphans. And a few years later, in 1865, Mr. Jeffery Hale willed money to set up a hospital for sick and disabled Protestants. Yeah. Now, while these two men were of different faiths, they shared remarkable foresight, and they shared a sense of compassion, obviously. And we're going to skip way forward to 2002, when these two establishments, still very active, actually joined their board of directors together. And that was quite a coup, I must tell you. There was a bit of squawking, and some people weren't sure about that, but now, when we look back, it was just a good thing to do, and I think everybody's pretty comfortable with it. And then, in 2007, there was that major health system reform, and Jeffery, Hale, St. Bridget's actually had a choice to get swallowed up by, for example, the Hale or some other C3S, but we said, no. We want to be together, we want to be fully legal, and we're going to serve both populations, and we're going to do it well. You watch us go. And at that time, most of the staff of Holland Centre integrated into the new combined Jeffery, Hale, St. Bridget's, except for me and a couple of other people. I am actually an employee of Jeffery, Hale Community Partners, but I'm loaned full-time to the hospital, which is kind of a true partnership, really, when it gets down to it. So it was bye-bye Holland Centre. A lot of people had shed tears over that one, including me, but you know what? I'm good to go. I'm good to move on, because it was hello Jeffery, Hale Community Services. And we grew from 4 employees to 10 employees when we started the day center, to 30 employees when all the CLSC crowd came over. Now we're over 600 employees. And some of you might be asking, what is my role as communications advisor? Well, I wrote that little history blurb that you saw. I like to talk about promoting the achievements of Jeffery, Hale, St. Bridget's. We have two foundations, the Friends Foundation and St. Bridget's Home Foundation. And we have Jeffery, Hale Community Partners, which is what I like to call our Research and Development Division, which is what Richard Walling is the head of. And I happen to be a champion of plain language and clear design. And I don't know if I'm just going to tell you what that is because I believe in that wholeheartedly. That means publications that use short words and short sentences and an uncluttered layout that make them easily understandable for people of all literacy levels. And in the health system, that is unbelievably. It's important. We're all busy, so the simpler it is to read, the more we're going to retain the information in that. So I encourage you all to think about that. And I work with our partners on joint projects to make sure that our combined messages are consistent and that we're meeting our mutual communications goals. And I am the guardian, I'm the watchdog of Jeffery, Hale, St. Bridget's visual brand identity. And one of my most recent challenges was developing a new logo. We had an awfully boring logo and it didn't speak to my heart, so I said, come on, we gotta get a new logo. So there it is, our new 2012 logo and tagline, a community of care. Doesn't quite translate as well into French, but we're not worried about that. I think they'll get the message. So we like the, I don't know if you remember the hand from the Holland Centre logo. There was a hand holding a flower. Well, we've integrated the hand, and the blue is calm and steadfast, yet light and friendly. The Kelly green represents life and renewal. The clasping hands show our unification in quality, safety, and compassion. And the shamrock forms a solid base for the hands and highlights our Irish roots, always close to heart. And finally, the movement in the hand showcases our organization's vitality. So what is this key to successful community development? Two things to retain there. It's community-based, knowledge-based, and community governance. So what is knowledge-based? Well, I mentioned it before. It's based on fact through statistical analysis, needs assessment, attitude and perception studies, blah, blah, blah. There's so many ways you can get a full understanding of the community and its environment. And after all, one thing I need to reinforce is, as a minority community, if you're a member of a minority community, if you don't make the effort to know your community, its needs, and all the players around, nobody else is going to do it for you. It's as simple as that. Don't expect the government to step up to the plate and say, you know, I noticed you people, you're just not using our services. No, that's not going to happen. We got to do it for ourselves. And what is community governance? Well, that's pretty obvious when the community members sit on the boards of directors. They take a lead in determining the needs. They take a lead in putting the solutions in place, and they stay active. They stay in control of the organizations as much as possible who are providing the services. And I just wanted to take a mention of, I'm not going to read through these, but this is an example of the projects that Jeffery Hale Community Partners is involved in right now. Richard Walling in particular is highly active in all kinds of things, all kinds of, it's growing. We're just growing. We'll never stop growing thanks to a multitude of partnerships with both community and public organizations. And here's a few more. See, Concordia is listed on there as well, as is Quebec High School, Voice of English Speaking Quebec, Central Quebec School Board, UQTR, and one of the projects we're working on right now especially is reaching out to special needs young people. However, there's a great focus will always remain on seniors. Seniors have always been the heart of our organization. And we have programs from caregiver support to long-term care to a huge number of programs and activities, and most of them are made possible by a wonderful, wonderful team of volunteers with whom we could not manage. It's as simple as that. And again, many, many, many of them are seniors. So that is pretty much the end of my story today. But it's really just the beginning, because there are so many projects on the horizon, as you can see, and there are still many service gaps to fill. We're not done. We know there's still needs out there, so we're always going to be looking to creative ways to work with volunteers and to work with our community partners to fill those gaps. And because it's, like I said, it's always been and it always will be about people and the quality of relationships with people in our community. So thank you. Now, Ruth can put you in touch with myself or Richard, and if you have access to the internet, please visit jhsb.ca, and you can get a really good idea of all of our programs and services.